Video 2, Monday, October 28, 2024. Before I get into it, I forgot something on my last video. So back in 2021, I had 89 potato plants growing. Some were completely out in the open, exposed to the ultraviolet radiation. Others I had underneath the burlap shade cloth, which is like quarter-inch openings. And the rest I had underneath polycarbonate, twin-wall polycarbonate panels. You often find these in greenhouses. Twin-wall polycarbonate panels, which has proven to deflect the radiation off the panels. 2021 is when in British Columbia we had what they thought was heat waves, but it was actually increased levels of radiation coming in. What I had underneath my polycarbonate panels, my potatoes did fantastic. The ones exposed to the radiation sustained DNA damage. This is what the ultraviolet radiation did to my potatoes. DNA damage. It's not just human DNA that damages, it's plants as well. Ultraviolet radiation reduces quality, quantity, and plant size, right down to the root vegetables. Beets, potatoes, carrots. Just thought I'd show you that one. Can you imagine what it's doing to the DNA inside of us bodies? So now we're going to talk about solar radiation, the solar proton events. Right now we're halfway between S2 and S3 radiation storms event. This is at least the third day, maybe into the fifth day. Now normally this level of radiation is confined to the polar regions of our planets. The magnetic cusps, they're like funnels. So the solar radiation, the solar winds hit our protective magnetic field and then are funneled down to the magnetic cusps into the polar regions. If we have a 100% stable magnetic field. I'll show you an animation. So before we get into it, actually, Earth's magnetic field is generated within the outer core of our planet. It leaves the south polar region and circles the planet and re-emerges back into the north magnetic cusp. As long as these 2 points are more or less antipodal, opposite to each other, we have a separated, organized magnetic field lines enveloping and protecting our planet. Leaving, re-emerging, coming back into the north polar cusp. In this NASA animation, the solar winds carrying the highly charged particles will hit the bow shock, the day side, outer edge of our protective magnetic field, magnetosphere, and they will be funneled down into the magnetic cusps, the polar cusps. Notice in this animation where they are placing magnetic north as it zooms in on the planet Earth. Siberia, Russia. So until 1904, 1903, magnetic north used to be in Nunavut, Canada, right up in this region here. Started this excursion, has already crossed over the geographical North Pole and is on its way to Siberia. So right now it is right about here. This is the most common picture used out there on the internet. So if our dipoles are antipodal, we have more or less organized, stable magnetic field lines, giving us protections from the harsh solar environment. However, during excursions, we can develop multiple north and south poles. So that radiation is no longer funneled only down to the north and south polar regions. And in this picture, we have what's called the South Atlantic anomaly, an area of our protected field which is extremely weak, which allows us increasing ionized radiation coming in, covering the majority of South America, Atlantic Ocean, and extending into the bottom end of Western Africa. This image is a few years old, so we don't know how much it has expanded. The dark red regions, magnetic intensity. This is where magnetic north is right now, just offshore. Magnetic south has already left Antarctica and is in the ocean between Antarctica and Australia. The convergence meeting point is going to be right around here. Continuing. Magnetic north is heading into Siberia. Magnetic south is heading in this direction. So as I stated before, the 2 points are drawing towards each other here, towards Indonesia. The further away you get from two ends of a magnet, the weaker the magnetic field lines. The points opposite the convergence here is the South Atlantic anomaly and the Americas in general. So I hypothesize that our weak magnetic field lines are on the opposite sides of the points of convergence, being North America, Central America, South America. Magnetic north, magnetic south, convergence point off of Sumatra, opposite end, South Atlantic anomaly. This is currently from the NOAA website. Global total electron content. I would suggest that the South Atlantic anomaly is growing. So because our protective magnetic field is in a state of flux, changing, variable, developing multiple magnetic pole regions, you would have multiple points of entry of our highly charged particles, including proton events. Proton events are normally confined to the north magnetic cusp and south. Once it reaches a certain level, then they issue an advisory, no air travel because of the risk of radiation to flight crew and passengers. I would suggest we are having multiple points around our planet now where that proton events, proton radiation levels are now reaching us, not just the polar regions. When this happens, you can have induced currents jumping across power lines. I'll show you one example. This is last January. There's a hydropoles in front of my house, high voltage. And you can, when I play this video, you'll see some plasma discharge across the horizontal cross members of the top, which would happen whenever we have solar radiation storms. So our insulators are right here, hanging down. It was quite fascinating to watch, and also worrisome because it's not supposed to be happening this far down on the lower 49th. Another thing that happened is during radiation storms, for some people you can get high-pitched ringing in the ears. One morning, my daughter woke up and she says, "Daddy, I got this ringing in my ear." Later on that day, I went down the laneway to visit a neighbor. He said, "Brian, I had this ringing in my ear. I never had it before." I'm just smirking, giggling, because I know exactly what's happening. We were in the event of right in the middle of a proton radiation event. Not supposed to be reaching down here. That picture I showed you of the DNA damaged potatoes, summer of 2021, it wasn't heat that damaged our crops. It was the increased ultraviolet radiation getting in. Once again, I think we have variable areas of magnetic flux where the different levels of radiation are getting in and getting through, because we no longer have a stable magnetic poles because they're on an excursion, destabilizing and weakening our protective field lines. And it's also affecting and breaking down our jet streams. Everything, man. It's the way I see it. It's the way I observe it. It's the way I study it. And when NASA starts putting out animations clearly showing that geomagnetic north is already on the coast of Siberia, there's no denying that the excursion has reached that far. What more can I say? So you take all those changes along with the probable axial tilt of our planet. What do you think's causing a breakdown of the AMOC?